Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it is my pleasure to welcome you today to the Tribunal here for one in a series of events that we've entitled ICTY Legacy Dialogues. Today, we'll be launching a publication entitled 15 Years of Outreach at the ICTY. We have some distinguished guests who will be talking about the outreach program of the ICTY since its inception. Without much ado, I would like first of all to introduce the president of the ICTY, Judge Karmela Jus, to give a few opening remarks and to welcome you here. Judge, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, good afternoon and welcome. It is indeed my pleasure and also an honor today to welcome you to this important event. An event which is designed to stimulate a discussion about the achievements, the challenges, and the legacy of the ICTY's pioneering outreach program. It is with particular pride that I applaud our publication, which, as you have heard, is entitled 15 Years of Outreach at the ICTY. It highlights and celebrates the valuable work undertaken by the outreach program over the past 15 years. This publication shows how the Tribunal's outreach efforts have helped and continue to help thousands of people from the former Yugoslavia to connect with its work each day of each year. The outreach program has over the years organized a great variety of activities, including grassroots projects with regional communities and the local media, youth outreach at school and universities, visits to the ICTY, as well as the production of documentaries, web and social media features. The creation of the Tribunal in 1993 heralded a suddenly discovered willingness on the part of the international community to bring perpetrators of war crimes to justice. The Tribunal's contribution to the development of international criminal law through, amongst other things, groundbreaking judgments, new rules of evidence and procedure, a robust body of jurisprudence, will be regarded as one of its most significant achievements. In addition, the Tribunal has played and continues to play a pivotal role both in setting global standards for international criminal justice and in supporting the rule of law at the local level. In this respect, a thorough understanding of the Tribunal's work by the international community as a whole and the countries of the former Yugoslavia in particular is critical to its broader success. While this appears obvious and self-evident today, believe me, it took some years for the Tribunal to realize how important it was to engage and discuss its works with the people most affected by the crimes within its jurisdiction. Yesterday I had a meeting with the mayor of The Hague, and he is not the only one that I have spoken to about our outreach program. And I explained to him how unfortunate it was that the tribunal took so long to set up its outreach program. In the meantime, a lot of damage was done on the ground in the former Yugoslavia. Fortunately, however, at the time when my predecessor, President Judge Gabriel Kirk MacDonald, was president in 1999, she realized that information on the ICTY cases in the region was not only scarce, but also misunderstood and sometimes purposely misinterpreted and misrepresented. It was because of this that she took the bold step of setting up an outreach program. However, despite its importance to the work of the tribunal, things did not proceed as smoothly as one would have wished. Outreach is not considered part of the tribunal's core functions, and therefore, I regret to say, it has never been funded by the UN through its regular budget. This means that the ICTY outreach program has had to rely on generous donations from governments and institutions. Despite financial and other challenges, however, the outreach program has created numerous opportunities to work with the communities in the region and reflect on the tribunal's achievements. By communicating directly with the people of the region through its various projects and activities, the outreach program has made the tribunal's trials, appeals, and judgments more accessible to the people, to everyone indeed. It has successfully overcome great logistical challenges, such as the tribunal's geographical distance from the locations where the atrocities were committed, and its use of languages and procedural rules foreign to the countries of the former Yugoslavia. As a result, the program's work has enabled countless people in the region to witness justice being done in The Hague and support justice being done at home. For us, this has been priority number one. During this last phase of its existence, perhaps more than ever before, it remains crucial for my tribunal, through the outreach program, to continue to disseminate its findings, to explain the significance of its achievements to the people of the former Yugoslavia, and to ensure that its legacy will endure. In light of this, we at the tribunal have envisaged and are in the process of preparing a series of events entitled ICTY Legacy Dialogues, the aim of which is to inspire and enable others to build on the achievements of the ICTY. These encounters are designed as dynamic, interactive exchanges. The official launch of 15 years of outreach at the ICTY on this day is a crucial component of the ICTY's Legacy Dialogue. Published on the occasion of the 15th anniversary of the ICTY outreach program, and at a moment in time when the tribunal is fast approaching the completion of its mandate, the publication provides an overview of the numerous activities, techniques, and projects developed by the ICTY outreach program at the different stages of its existence. The publication also summarizes outreach-related activities undertaken by the Office of the President, both mine and, of course, of my predecessors, and the Office of the Prosecutor. As the ICTY's last president, I would like to use this opportunity to thank everyone who has contributed to the success of the outreach program. Without your support, it would not have become a strong and positive precedent for the outreach efforts of other international courts and tribunals. In particular, I wish to express our sincere gratitude to the European Union for funding the outreach program for over 15 years, and to the Finnish government for additionally supporting the program's youth component. I would also like to express my appreciation to the outreach staff, past and present, whose dedication and professionalism are the pillars of the success of the outreach program. Finally, I would also like to thank you for joining us today for what I hope will be an interesting and enlightening discussion. The end of next year, when we will wind up and close down our doors, outreach will be inherited by the mechanism, which I am sure will continue with the good work the ICTY has done. With this in mind, I can assure everyone present here that the MICT President and myself continue to remain in close contact and cooperate to ensure a proper handover. Thank you.
Thank you. As you've heard from the President, one of the strongest and staunchest supporters of the outreach project from its inception has been the European Union, and it is with great pleasure that I would like to introduce a senior expert from the European Commission, David Hudson, to say a few words on behalf of the European Union. Mr. Hudson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Registrar, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honour to represent the European Commission at this publication launched today. The European Commission has supported and worked closely with the ICTY since its inception. This is natural. We have a lot in common. A common understanding of the importance of the rule of law, a common desire to see that victims receive justice, and a common view of the importance of justice in promoting reconciliation. I shall return to the question of reconciliation and the role of outreach in a moment, but first let me say a brief word about our other commonalities. Respect for the rule of law is one of the fundamentals at the heart of the enlargement process which binds the European Union and the Western Balkans together. Cooperation with the ICTY is an essential criteria within the rule of law negotiations. We have shown in many cases in the past, and we will continue to show in the future, that without this cooperation, there is no clear path to accession. At the heart of any approach which supports the rule of law, there are, of course, the victims, and the European Union is centred around ensuring that victims have effective access to justice. Through the accession negotiations, we're involved, directly or indirectly, at every stage in this process, nationally and regionally, from the efficiency of police investigations, through standards for witness support, to facilitating prosecutorial cooperation and the training of judges. In all of this, we work closely together with the ICTY. Your advice, your expertise, and your experience are invaluable in ensuring that justice is done, not just in this building, but in courtrooms around the region. It is vital that justice is done, and as the saying goes, that justice is seen to be done. But it is just as important that justice is understood. Across the region, for reasons that are very human and understandable, the divisions are between us and them, defenders and aggressors, our heroes and their criminals. Far less is heard of the other division, the division between victims and perpetrators. It is a more complex division, a division that does not sit easily with national narratives, a division that is emotionally, psychologically, and socially more difficult to process. Yet it is the division that best allows for mutual understanding and to prepare the ground for eventual reconciliation. The ICTY's outreach program plays a significant role in this process. It operates at many levels, from TV screen to classroom. It seeks to promote the understanding that is necessary for that future reconciliation. And for that reason, the European Commission is proud to be able to continue to support this vital work of the court and of the dedicated individuals who make up the outreach team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now watch a brief 5-minute video on the outreach program, which will basically show you what we've done in the last 15, 16 years since the outreach program was launched. And I'll just ask for the video to be played at this.
The outreach program that we created was designed to bring the tribunal to the former Yugoslavia, was designed to let the people in the region know what we were doing and how we were doing it. If the decisions were not reached in a fair way, then how could our decisions help to bring about a lasting peace or help to lay the groundwork for some reconciliation?
Danas smo ovdje u sklopu outreach programa prezentacije u srednjim školama u Bosni i Hercegovini, ali i u cijeloj regiji kroz koje ćemo upoznati mlade srednjoškolce sa radom tribunala.
Dakle, došlo se do informacija preko sudnicama Haškog tribunala da je na prostoru cijele bivše Jugoslavije približno ubijeno oko 140.000 ubijenih ljudi. Govorimo na cijelu...
The message now is much clearer, as I said. There's no longer impunity. And this is, in my opinion, the greatest, the most fundamental, the most important legacy of the ICTY.
Today, Ratko Mladic is in the custody of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia.
And of course it's been very much our commitment to following through on our promise of justice to those victims that led to the book that we're launching here tonight.
The training of legal professionals is being conducted in close cooperation with the ODIHR office and the OSCE offices in the region. We offer tailor-made training to the legal staff, supporting staff as well as professionals all over the region in specific components of the ICTY court records database.
jednog optuženika koji je to zahtevao.
Now, the first thing you notice when you walk in here are the sheer number of cameras around here. There are 6 in this particular courtroom.
And then it gets broadcast on the tribunal's website all around the world, but perhaps in particular to the former Yugoslavia itself, so people can hear exactly what is happening.
As with all of our outreach activities, the aim of the documentary is to make the ICTY proceedings more accessible, to strengthen that vital link between the tribunal and all who are interested in our work.
I think they do a great job of making both the work and the images available to the public in a way that, wouldn't be possible. I think it's just making the work of the tribunal tangible.
Thank you. I would, at this stage, like to invite our panelists to take a seat, and we will begin our panel on the discussion of outreach over the last 15 years. Mario Mažić, Director of Programs at the Youth Initiative for Human Rights in Croatia. Mario has helped us implement the house school component of the youth outreach program in Croatia, and particularly over the last few years, last year, I believe. So he can tell us more about the experience that he's had in interacting with young people as part of the outreach initiative. He's been instrumental in particular in promoting the work and the achievements of the tribunal in Croatia since the field office that the tribunal had in Zagreb was closed. Next to him is Dr. Marko Milanović, Associate Professor at the University of Nottingham School of Law. Dr. Milanović has written extensively on perceptions of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in the region, and also analyzed the tribunal's outreach efforts and to what extent they've changed perceptions about the work of the tribunal in the region. Then we have Mrs. Rada Pejić-Srema. She's head of the ICTY outreach program. She's worked on the outreach project since 2010. She's a communications professional with over 15 years of experience, and she's actually also done a master's degree in focusing on transitional justice, particularly looking at how to deal with the past and the role of the ICTY in post-conflict recovery in the former Yugoslavia. And to my left here is Mrs. Lada Šoljan, legal officer with the Office of the Prosecutor here at the ICTY. She has participated in outreach efforts of the Prosecutor's Office, but also the tribunal more generally. She's been an international criminal lawyer since 2005 here in The Hague, and she will also be talking about her participation in the youth outreach efforts. In the outreach efforts. I'll start maybe with a question for Rada, who's head of the ICTY outreach program. Maybe you can tell us why was the outreach program, we've heard a little bit from the President why it was and when it was created, but how was it created, how was it developed at the beginning, and what were the challenges that you were faced with at the beginning 15, 16 years ago? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Elder. Thank you everyone for coming. It is a great pleasure to be here today. Before I answer your question, let me just briefly talk about the reasons why we produced this publication. In the final years of the Tribunal's mandate, the outreach program has worked together with the other key sections of the Tribunal on preservation of the court's legacy. Moreover, the Tribunal's outreach forms an important part of this legacy, and in this publication, we have tried to summarize many outreach projects and activities. We also wanted to share our experience and offer insight into how outreach program developed over the years, but also highlighted the challenges we have faced. So let me start with a question. What is outreach? How does it differ from public information and why is it needed? Outreach is definitely more than public information. The public information stops at making information available to the public. Outreach, on the other hand, is more complex and proactive. It includes a multifaceted set of activities such as public consultation, media engagement, dissemination of information, and in general strategies to engage the public, especially targeting communities in the former Yugoslavia. In 1993, when the Tribunal was established, it immediately set up a public information service. But in the first 6 years, it had no distinct outreach program. The first years of the Tribunal were a struggle. Never before in history was there an international tribunal with such a complex task. It had a large scope of crimes to investigate on a large geographical and temporal scale with practically no access to evidence as the countries of the former Yugoslavia were ravaged by war. It built its legal and procedural framework from scratch to deal with a body of international law, which for most of its existence was never implemented in a modern court of law. At that time, communication with the communities of the former Yugoslavia was viewed as equivalent to the public relations of national courts, which enjoy natural acceptance from the wider society with which they share common values. Thus, rarely, if ever, speak beyond its judicial pronouncements. The assumption was, at the time, that the Tribunal's decision and judgments would also speak for themselves. The breakthrough, however, came in 1997, when the first ICTY judgment was issued. Among the Tribunal staff, there was a widespread feeling of achievements. However, in the region of the former Yugoslavia, the situation was completely different. The judgment was either ignored or misrepresented in the media. At that point, the Tribunal's principals understood that in the region the judgments will not speak for themselves and that a targeted communication effort would be needed to address this problem. The Tribunal president at that time, Judge Gabriel Kirk MacDonald, established a team to assess the court's engagement in the region and what could be done to improve it. As a result, in 1999, the ICTY outreach program came into existence. This was the first time that an international court decided to set up such a program, in addition to a more traditional public information service. From the very beginning, the objective of outreach program was to render the Tribunal more transparent, accessible, and comprehensible to the people in the former Yugoslavia. At first, the newly established outreach was focused on getting accurate information out to the region. It placed liaison officers and outreach staff who spoke the local languages in Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Serbia to act as the main point of contact for the people in the region. It translated and distributed information material into Bosnian, Serbian, or Croatian, including key judgments, decisions, and other basic documents. It created a version of the Tribunal's website in the regional languages and facilitated the audio-visual broadcast of proceedings on the ICTY website. Over the years, outreach established contacts with the media, NGOs, government officials, and victim groups. The program quickly expanded from providing information on the ICTY to actively engaging to the local population in a conversation about the need to end impunity. This led to a fully fledged program that we have today. Now let me quickly just go over the main challenges that outreach has faced over the years. I will just name a few. The complex socio-political context, working within limitations of the tribunal's legal framework and funding challenge. However, one of the biggest challenges we have faced is changing the perception of the tribunal in the former Yugoslavia. This has certainly been easier said than done. The ICTY has faced a particularly complex context, which still poses a great challenge to our attempt at shaping local perceptions of the tribunal's work. As the main opposition to the tribunal in the region is of a political nature, this limits Outreach's ability to act. Namely, the tools at the program's disposal are neither political nor of equivalent power. In addition, developing an effective outreach program within the limitations of the tribunal's legal framework was far from straightforward. In all its activities and products, outreach had to walk a fine line, trying to find the balance between generic everyday language and the precision of the law. In the other words, to explain the complex legal notions, procedures, and arguments in a way that is understandable to the general audience. And finally, despite its relevance to the work of the tribunal, outreach was never considered part of its core function and was never included in the tribunal's regular budget. This means that a significant amount of outreach staff, time, and energy is spent on fundraising efforts instead of being used for substantive outreach activities. However, to finish on a more positive note, outreach staff never gave up. Over the years, we have came up, I believe, with creative activities that could bring the results on a limited budget, and by our determination and trial and error, in the end, we have been able to provide current and future war crime courts with what we did not have in our beginnings, and that is a blueprint for conducting outreach.
Thank you, Rada. You mentioned perceptions as one of the challenges changing perceptions in the region. Dr. Milanovic, you looked at perceptions in the region, you conducted opinion polling. Can you tell us what are these perceptions? Have they changed? Has the outreach program in terms of perceptions made an impact? Can you maybe give us an overview of what you've discovered in your research?
Will do. Thank you very much, Elder, for inviting me, and thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to be here. Can I first start off by noting you said at one point, Rada, that the tribunal had to work in a complex socio-political context.
Yeah.
The art of the euphemism is still very much alive. Now, I am not a UN staff member, so I don't have to be that gentle. And the fact of the matter is that it is very hard to say to what extent the tribunal's work generally and the work of the outreach section actually impacted on the public perceptions in the former Yugoslavia. That's an empirical question, right? But the tribunal's work and the work of the outreach section in particular are part of a much wider array of things that influence public opinion, and it's not possible to really draw confident conclusions about the causative effect of some of these things. But we do know some things. And so what I will talk about are these surveys of public opinion that some of you have already seen. And these are surveys that have been done in Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia over several years by the Belgrade Center for Human Rights and the OSCE. There have also been 2 surveys done by UNDP and a local polling agency in Kosovo. And so now I will very briefly show you, if you can see those slides, I will very briefly show you what these surveys have shown. We have many points of data. The data I will talk to you now about is really, do people in the former Yugoslavia believe in the factual determinations of the tribunal, that a particular crime happened and the particular people are guilty of that crime? Because if they don't, as the ambassador was saying, if we want these things, if we want these tribunals to contribute to reconciliation, presumably this is the only way that can be done, that people believe in the judgments of the tribunal. So here you have a graph about the worst crime of the Yugoslav conflict, the Srebrenica genocide. This shows you the ethnic Serb population of Serbia. And you can see from the graph that only 10% of the ethnic Serb population of Serbia believe in the tribunal's account. meaning that more than 7,000 Bosnian men Bosnian Muslim men and boys were killed in July 1995. Everybody else engages in some form of denial. They might minimize, so they might say, oh yes, the crime happened, but there was, many fewer people were killed. Or they will say, no, they were killed in battle, and so on. So this is Srebrenica. In Republika Srpska, the findings are even worse. Can we move to the next slide? So here you have, a representative sample of all the other very bad crimes in Bosnia. So you saw on the video, you saw there was this outreach event in Prijedor. Now look at that there. Fourth line there about the Serb-controlled camps in Prijedor, as you know, probably the worst crimes in the war other than Srebrenica. Only 6.5, that's single digits, 6.5% of the population of the Republika Srpska believe that this happened, okay? And so the numbers for most of these crimes are in the single digits, depending on who the perpetrators and who the victims are. You can see no, if you're going to go back, sorry. If you see the last two crimes, so the first 4 crimes are crimes committed by Serbs against Muslims. The last 2 are crimes committed by Bosniaks against Serbs. And you can see how immediately the belief of the Bosniak population drops. So as soon as they're the perpetrators, half of them disbelieve. But paradoxically still, more Bosniaks believe in crimes committed by Bosniaks against Serbs than Serbs believe in those crimes. So there's this collective amnesia aspect in the Bosnian Serb population. If we can go quickly to the next slide. So this is polling in Serbia about crimes dealing with Croatia or with Croats. You can see that 2/3 of the population of Serbia don't believe the Vukovar crimes happened. Okay? Whereas at the same time, 3/4 believe that Croatian forces committed crimes against Serbs in Bljesak and Oluja. If we go to the next slide, you can see this is Croatia, and you can see that the polling is really the mirror image. So here everybody believes in crimes against Croats, in Vukovar, in the ethnic cleansing of Croats from Knin, but 2/3, or again, 62% don't believe in crimes in Oluja, in Operation Storm. And finally, if we look at Kosovo, which is the next slide, you can see that in Serbia, the population vastly believes in crimes committed by Albanians against Serbs, but they do not believe that crimes committed by Serbs against Albanians actually happened. And finally, the final slide. This is from the polling in Kosovo. And you can see, so here, this was a different type of question, so the polling is not as granular in the Belgrade Center polls. But you can see that in 2007, 80% of Kosovo Albanians believe the members of their own ethnicity did not commit a crime. Now that dropped a teeny weeny bit in 2012, okay? But the attitudes of the Serbian population hardened. And in fact, if you look at the trust of these institutions in the ICTY, it tells you why, for example, Kosovo Albanians are now more trusting of the ICTY in 2012 than in 2007, and that's because the ICTY acquitted Kosovo Albanian defendants. And so that leads us to my very final slide. That leads us to the basic conclusion, which is, if I can put it in a nutshell, is this. The ICTY is believed only when it says what people want it to say. Only if it confirms the pre-existing beliefs of that particular community. So at work you really have, and I can talk about the psychological aspects of it, you essentially have a massive cycle of confirmation bias. You have people who genuinely are moral, decent human beings, right? They're not evildoers. They're not people who denied the genocide because they know it happened, but they actually don't want to admit it. You have people who are on a large scale simply reason through the information they're given in such a way that they very easily dismiss what the ICTY says when the ICTY impacts on their own sense of identity, individual and collective. So in that sense, whether the ICTY had this particular achievement, if you will, depends on how you define achievement. I mean, the ICTY and the outreach section certainly worked on changing perceptions, but I don't think they succeeded. or I don't think they could have succeeded in changing people's perceptions.
If I may then ask a follow-up question, why do you think is this so? I mean, you explain it's a psychological process, but is there another persona or another group of people that might help promote the legacy of the tribunal that is not doing its job? I mean, where do you see the responsibility for establishing what happened and imparting this to the population? I mean, an outreach team of several dozen people probably cannot change public opinion as such.
Frankly, I don't think an outreach team that was 1,000 people could have changed things much. Because what happened was the complex socio-political context, which is that elites in these societies, people who control the media, who control the economy, who control politics, who control education, they, or the vast majorities of these elites, realized, and from the beginning of the war, used ethnic nationalism as mobilizing, as a tool for mobilizing their power. These people are still there. Sometimes it's the sons of the predecessors. Sometimes it's the actual people. Yeah? And they have opposed the work of the ICTY from the very beginning. So the only people, the only communities, again, that to an extent trust the ICTY in the former Yugoslavia are those communities for which the ICTY validated their particular nationalist victimhood narrative. And that's the ethnic Albanians and Bosnian Muslims. Croats and Serbs, they hate its guts because, again, for Croatian and Serb nationalism, the ICTY was everything that the political elites of these communities stood for. And unless you have elites that don't perceive a particular tribunal, now I'm generalizing, if you have an international criminal tribunal and it is perceived to be a threat by dominant local elites, no amount of outreach will be able to counter what these elites can do, because these elites are vastly more powerful locally than any kind of outreach effort can be.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to our next panelist. Lana from the Office of the Prosecutor. My question to you is, what was your experience going to countries in the region? I believe you went to Serbia, you were talking to university students there. How receptive are they to messages emanating from an international tribunal, to judgments coming from an international tribunal? Do they believe that these facts have now been established? What was your reaction when trying to present the work of the Office of the Prosecutor, the cases that you've brought before the tribunal? Could you maybe elaborate on your experience in the region talking to students, and also on the efforts that the Office of the Prosecutor has made in outreach?
Sure, Ella. In terms of, maybe I'll just begin with the broader, the OTP as a whole, and then point in and talk about my specific experience of working in the outreach zone. But in terms of the OTP, its work really, outreach has been integral to its work at the end of the day. Because ultimately, from the day that it came onto the territory while the conflict was still ongoing in 1994, it realized very quickly how important it was to clarify to the stakeholders it was dealing with the various, the facts of what it was doing, to clarify the facts about OTP's own mission and mandate. I mean, again, there I can even personal anecdotes, but in missions, my very first missions going to interview various suspects, getting asked questions about, well, why are you talking about me? Why are you talking to me? Why aren't you talking about the crimes happening to the other ones? And again, explaining what our mandate is, explaining under what circumstances we're working at. An informal sort of outreach, if you will. But OTP, as such, has addressed many different audiences in the region, in the countries of the former Yugoslavia. It has spoken to victims and witnesses as such. It has built relationships. It has spoken to national authorities, and again, that goes back to providing the necessary support, explaining one's mission, explaining the work that it is doing and what it needs in order to make sure that it is gathering evidence, that it is reaching the victims and the witnesses that it needs to reach. It definitely needed to establish cooperation of the state authorities at different levels. So the prosecutors, the senior trial attorneys have been going to the region and meeting with the various dignitaries and high officials in order to establish and maintain these contacts. Again, this is a form of outreach, maintaining cooperation. Media, the media presence has been very important. We ourselves in the OTP have a small OTP media office with somebody who speaks what we call BCS, Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, and therefore can be the first point of contact to anybody trying to reach and establish more concrete facts about what's going on, can get clarification about the context and the facts of an ongoing case or current situation. In terms of OTPs or my own personal experience in outreach, I have done lecturing to university students across Serbia that I did a couple of years ago. And it was interesting. I went to 5 different cities, about 7 different universities, some of them media universities, some of them law, different ages of students, different levels of knowledge. And it was interesting. I mean, I don't think that I can actually really summarize it because every single class was different and every single set of questions was quite particular. But I would say that there was skepticism that greeted me with pretty much every single lecture I came to give. And so they had very challenging questions. I think this has also depended on the periods of time and whether a certain judgment that may not seem favorable to the society in the particular region came out at that time. But they were also very open to listening. And again, this maybe has to do with the fact that it is a university setting, that these are people who are still in formation, who are very much interested in understanding what is going on and understanding finally their own history and their own circumstances in which they're in. I ultimately found this to be a really a terrific experience, very educational for myself, but I think educational for the students who heard me speak, because I was bringing them, I was explaining how the OTP worked, I was explaining to them and providing some sort of an insider perspective as to ICTY precedents, jurisprudence, and some of the processes, as well as dispelling a fair number of misconceptions that are simply a part of the regular discourse on a daily basis. Other than this particular outreach experience, Outreach, of course, here hosts numerous visiting groups, some of them from the region, some of them from, many from all around the world, also from high school or upper level high school all the way to various professional groups and judges. And many of us from the OTP have participated in these lectures. They basically are given I think that they happen every single day over here and are well organized by the outreach. But in these circumstances as well, we get a lot of challenging questions. And again, in the process, it is a process of exchanging, of communicating, of clarifying, of providing information about the mandate and about the key information on the OTP's activities. Maybe just a final point to make, you saw on the documentary video just moments ago, both the prosecutor attending the Srebrenica Memorial commemoration there. You also saw OTP Deputy Prosecutor Michelle Jarvis speaking about the publication of the book on prosecuting conflict-related sexual violence. So this, again, is another form of outreach. We in the OTP have been looking back through what has been done through the past 23 years, specifically in the context of prosecuting sexual violence crimes. And now this knowledge that has been gathered concerning our own experience is again being shared back with the community and discussed with. So it's an ongoing process. And I think it will continue past the existence of the ICTY.
Thank you. Mario Majic was part of a team of people also going to high schools in Croatia, talking to pupils there about the work of the tribunal in the last few years, last year in particular. What was your experience of interacting with the students? How receptive were they to the messages of the of outreach, of the judgments of the tribunal? What skepticism we heard here when she went to universities? Is it similar? Is that your impression from your experience in Croatia as well?
Well, I think I want to start by saying that what every educator knows, actually, and this is that it's very easy to teach someone who doesn't know about the topic, and it's very easy to teach someone who does know about the topic. The problematic thing is teaching someone who thinks they know about the topic but actually don't. And this is the situation that we saw around young people in the former Yugoslavia. You know, even before the outreach program, the youth component was actually started in 2011. We have been doing some work with young people and promoting the work of the tribunal and the information about the work of the tribunal because we saw this need. First of all, we have to understand what are the sources of information for young people when it comes to the work of the tribunal and the point of its work. And I think the youth initiative was sort of a natural partner to the tribunal here because the young people who are engaged in the youth initiative are the same sort of target group that we have actually targeted with this program. I'm personally from Petrinja, which was affected by the conflict. My father was in the Croatian army. I had a lot of influence in terms of what to think about this from the family, from the community, from the media, from the politicians. And all these information that we got were very sided and full of prejudice and not really founded on facts. So when we started working with young people, talking to them about the relevance of rule of law, about the importance of these established facts in dealing with the past and understanding what actually happened and building your own position towards what happened, we saw that there's an immense amount of prejudice that's very, very hard to crack. On one hand, there is this inability of young people of this generation to critically examine some processes, because we have to know that these young people who go to universities now and who were going to high school just 5-6 years ago were actually, let me say, intellectually formed in a time when extreme nationalism was the dominant ideology in the region, when people in the region were actually killing each other. This has been the most important sort of influence on the young people growing up. So there's this inability to critically approach or to have this critical overview of the process that is so filled with emotions and with political positions. And on another hand, all these young people, wherever in the region we're talking about, bring these certain attitudes and what they think is knowledge from their family and the community. And if we just focused the sort of public communication of outreach on feeding facts and figures about its work, it cannot be done like that, because these facts and figures do not fit the picture that the young people have about the tribunal's work. I'm sure that's also true for the politicians and even the media workers, not just for young people, but I think with youth is sort of most transparent. So I would like to say that when we started working with young people and informing them about the work of the tribunal, it was 2009. I'm very happy that Klara Dokmanovic is here. She worked at the liaison office in Zagreb, and we worked together bringing groups of young people to the tribunal to talk to them, to have video link with The Hague and get some information. But we noticed that we cannot just bring them to the office and give them these facts and figures. We had to work with them before to break those these prejudices that existed. We had to go back to explaining and really have them understand the importance of rule of law, the importance of satisfying justice for victims, and foremost, satisfying justice for the benefit of new generations. It is the work that's instrumental, and I think that's the message that we managed to promote among most of the young people that we worked with. The work that the ICTY, but also local judiciaries are working on now in terms of justice is sort of setting the basis for the system of justice that we will be living in tomorrow. And so I think this was definitely the first response of young people, a lot of prejudice towards the work of the tribunal. So we always started explaining why the tribunal was actually established, what was the point of the establishment of the tribunal, because this is more or less easy to understand as a response to grave violations taking place that are very known to very many young people that we were working with. And also what I wanted to say was that we actually focused the presentations of the outreach on the areas that were affected by the conflict. It's easier to hold presentations in a law school in Zagreb or Split, but going to the communities that were affected by the conflict, where young people have very direct links to what happened and what has been prosecuted here at the tribunal, that's a more challenging but much more important part. So you even saw in the video how the car driving through not very well developed roads, going to different communities to speak about it. I think this was instrumental. And I cannot say that we changed a lot of minds in terms of that, but and what Marko presented, these numbers, it's never easy to see them. And maybe what the outreach had done and what we've done didn't prove to be so instrumentally relevant from the perspective of changing figures, but having this place where young people can get competent information about what's going on without them being so dragged into political territory is, I think, crucial. And I think this is what the outreach has done, and what's very commendable. And yeah, maybe for this first round, I would stop here.
Before actually we turn to the future outreach activities and what we can do in the remaining year of the ICTY mandate, I actually have a follow-up question for both Marko, Mario, whoever wants to respond. We saw in your slides that citizens are receptive to a judgment if it confirms what they already believe in, because this is coming from an international tribunal, they're skeptical towards it. Does it make a difference if the messenger is a local politician or somebody who's lived through the same experience? Let's say, Mario, when you go and talk to high school students because you have lived in the war, you will have a shared experience with those students. Are they more receptive if you tell them about the work of the tribunal, or is it even more difficult because you're perceived as, you know, I don't know, you've betrayed the cause? Or, I mean, does it make a difference? And also from your research, does it make a difference whether it's the tribunal, where it's an outsider promoting its work, or whether it is somebody from the community?
Well, as I said, I think it's very important for the tribunal to do this work because it is the place that provides the competent information. But then again, I am convinced that among youth, peer-to-peer education is extremely important, and it's, I think there is sort of more openness to critically examining what someone is saying. You know, when someone from the position of authority is telling young people about this and that, they're going to question it less. When it's one of them, they're going to be more open to criticism, and I think this is a good thing. I think this is this showed to be the focus of the outreach program, to finally start assessing the work of the tribunal and understanding its legacy critically.
I would say first, I don't think the key issue here is whether it's the tribunal or, say, a domestic court. I don't think the problem here is the distance, the fact that the ICTY is in The Hague rather than, I don't know, in Sarajevo. You know, the state court of Bosnia and Herzegovina is in Sarajevo, yet the Bosnian Serbs still hate it. Yeah? So that's not really, I think, the problem.
But if it were in Banja Luka, would it make a difference?
If it said what they wanted it to say, then it would make a difference. So what does make a difference is we need to understand how truths of this type get formed. They don't get necessarily formed by being exposed to this enormous body of evidence. Now, everybody here in this room, I hope, believes in climate change, yes? Did you examine the evidence by yourself? No, right? How do you know there's climate change? You chose to believe a certain set of scientists, whatever, yeah? You chose to trust an authority. There are people out there in the world who don't buy into that. There are people out there who don't believe that vaccines cause autism, that believe homeopathy cures cancer, whatever. You're not going to persuade them by telling them, look, there's this study in Nature. Understand? So facts don't work. What works in this context is emotion. You need to feel the truth. So we have in the surveys of public opinion, for example, for Serbia, we have 10 years of surveys. And you can see there's a peak of the acceptance of Srebrenica. And that peak correlates with the video of the execution of the boys in Trnovo. Yeah? And it made a difference. That one video made a difference. Now, the difference in the meantime, the effects have worn off. Yeah, but that kind of stuff, which is not something that the court can really do on a systemic basis, the stuff that catches you in your gut, now that can help.
Thank you.
That should
answers the question. Turning to the second round of questions that I have is looking towards the future. Rada, maybe you can tell us what are the plans for the remaining year in terms of the ICTY's outreach, and what would be your recommendations for, let's say, other tribunals, lessons learned from the outreach program over the last 15 years?
Well, the last year of the ICTY's mandate, we will focus our efforts on a number of legacy activities to ensure that its work remains accessible long after the end of the ICTY. In addition to that, we, since 2014, we have started implementing a phase-out strategy, which means that we are going to transfer ownership over our projects to our regional stakeholders. For example, we are working on the establishment of information centers in the former Yugoslavia. These centers, they're going to provide direct access to the entire public archive of the ICTY. Tribunal is going to assist the establishment of the information centers, however, they're going to be under the ownership of the local actors. Currently, our efforts are focused on establishment of 2 information centers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The first one is going to be established in Sarajevo in partnership with the city of Sarajevo, and also negotiations are advanced on establishment of information centers in Srebrenica as part of the Memorial Center. In addition to that, in these final years, we are going to intensify our efforts in providing factual information to young people in the region on the conflicts of the 90s and the role of the tribunal. We are going to build on our successful youth outreach project, and we will try to approach greater number of high school and university students. In addition to that, we have already started transfer ownership over this project to local actors. Namely, we have trained high school teachers and NGO members in the field of youth education and human rights who are going to implement this project after 2017. Also, another important aspect of our phase-out strategy is the development of the ICTY legacy website. For the legacy website project, we are going to use, we will make use of the material contained in the ICTY archive in order to produce features. These features are designed to draw attention and raise awareness about the ICTY legacy. Finally, I will mention our documentaries. We will continue our work on the series of documentaries that we started in 2010. These documentaries are going to retain a unique educational value and will represent the tribunal's achievements from the tribunal's point of view in years to come. Now let me just briefly talk about recommendations. I'll just mention a few, the most important, that I see as the most important. First of all, what I would recommend that the outreach strategy should be prepared at the very beginning of a tribunal. The strategy should determine the goals, but also staffing, activities, partners, etc. Also, it is really, really important for outreach to be well integrated within a court, as the outreach works in tandem with other key offices. There is a really need for support from all key principals of a court, who must agree on goals of outreach, the strategy of outreach, style in communicating, the key messages, and the target audiences. Secondly, and this has been mentioned here already for several times, I think that outreach must be properly funded. Considering the importance of outreach to the work of international courts, it is crucial that it is part of a core budget and to be provided with all necessary resources to carry out its work successfully. And also, considering that there is only so much that outreach could do, it is crucial to establish contacts and networks with partners, such as NGOs, media, academic institutions, which will act as a secondary source of information. So these are the...
Thank you. Marco, from your perspective as a researcher, as an academic, where would you see room for improvement in communicating messages of outreach? You mentioned, for instance, this video of executions in Srebrenica changed public opinion more than possibly lectures that were given at university. Would, for instance, the showing of more documentaries on the war crimes that were committed change public opinion? Would a buy-in by local actors, NGOs, politicians change perceptions? What do you see is crucial in the future to actually get a change in perceptions?
Thanks for the question. Of course, academics and concrete recommendations don't come naturally together. I mean, when it comes to your suggestion that, you know, more videos, more documentaries of that stuff could help, I don't think that's necessarily true, because people are they have a propaganda radar. Even if you're immersed in propaganda, like everybody in these societies is, the moment you realize something is propagandistic, you're going to reject it. So if you have something very polished, like a nice video that, you know, tries to cohere some things like that, that's very easy to dismiss, you know. What worked in the Scorpions case is the fact that it's raw and authentic. That it's visceral. That's what worked there. But even now, if you go on YouTube, you will find channels of people, you know, if you go on YouTube comments, which is not a happy experience normally, but you will see how people say, this was all photoshopped, or this was all, you know, doctored. So the question of trust there is key. You know, you have had these in Croatia, for example. You have what's his name, Oliver Prilic. Prilic. You know, a theater director who brought women who survived crimes on all sides, who were raped or whose children were killed, come to talk to the audience or talk to each other. You know, when you have that kind of emotional experience, that I think can work. I don't think the problem is necessarily communication's failure. The communication, the only thing, the ICTY or any tribunal cannot be a propaganda machine. It cannot do what the Serbian official television does. So the problem is, how do you get through various layers of mediators at the local level, the political, intellectual, cultural elites? How do you get your message across? And without local elite buy-in, it's never going to work. The experience that we have from other tribunals shows that the only examples of it working was when the local elites did not oppose the tribunal. So people say, you know, outreach in Cambodia was excellent, or outreach in Sierra Leone was excellent. I mean, it was certainly better, more well-funded earlier, as you said, which is a very important thing than here. But what was the key factor there is that nobody in Sierra Leone, I mean, nobody in power in Sierra Leone or Liberia was against the Charles Taylor trial. Nobody seriously in power. In Cambodia, you know, the Khmer Rouge have been defeated. And the problem there comes that many members of the current elite, including the Prime Minister, have a Khmer Rouge background. And what they have done is they have managed and controlled that tribunal into not going where they don't want it to go. The similar thing happened with Rwanda. Why is the ICTR not hated the way the Yugoslav tribunal is not hated? Because it never prosecuted people who belong to the current ruling elite. The problem with that, of course, is that if you only go after the people whom the elite wants you to go after, you are one-sided and biased in a particular way. So some tribunals, like I think this one, are, by the sort of nature of the context in which they operate, doomed to fail in persuading the local audience from the very, very beginning. It might not fail if, for example, one of the warring parties is completely defeated, which is what happened to Germany, which is what happened to Japan, which is what happened to, I don't know, Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka. But if you have this kind of elite continuity, group cohesion over time, if you have the same people running the place as they ran during the war, how exactly are things going to change? Simply because we have better outreach. I don't think they will.
Thank you. Lada, your recommendations in terms of activities for the future, any recommendations maybe for national jurisdictions, for capacity building in the region?
Well, I don't know about full-on recommendations, but there was one sentence that I liked in this publication, or two sentences, but I'll read them together. The tribunal's legacy, the evidence gathered, testimonies offered, facts established, and judgments issued, will remain even after the tribunal completes its last case. This legacy will be the tribunal's ultimate outreach. And so while I appreciate Marco's points about you're not persuading local audiences, the impact of the visceral impacting, well, okay, we've got, in terms of the testimonies offered, facts established, judgments issued, those are readily available on our websites for both ICT and MICT. In terms of evidence gathered, as you know, we've got over 9 million pages of documents gathered by the OTP, thousands reels of tape, all kinds of audiovisual material, and not all of this is available, nor will be available to local or international audiences. Much of it is confidential, but over time, there is this evidence that at some point in time will become accessible. Already now, in terms of what the OTP has been doing for a while, and it's a form of, you can call it outreach, but I believe it's also capacity building, have been the interrelationship that have been formed with the regional, the national judiciaries in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Croatia, in Serbia. We get requests for assistance, and our own transition unit will then actually assist in finding and directing those searches, in making available various materials for people from national jurisdictions to come and actually look into this material. Again, this may be the professionals, this may be juridical to juridical, but nevertheless, the evidence is being made available. We've got also the European Union-sponsored Young Professionals and Liaison Prosecutor program, and that again has been another way of both reaching out and bringing in a way of making evidence available to national jurisdictions. Peer-to-peer, which again has been something that has happened in the course of our cases, in the course of discussions by senior trial attorneys, in case-specific circumstances, whether it be Kosovo trial, Srebrenica related, where you're speaking, of course, to also national prosecutors and judiciaries, but you're also speaking to different levels of stakeholders. You're speaking to the victims and witnesses, you're speaking to civil societies, and so on and so forth. So there are different fora. Evidence, whether it hits you viscerally or whether it's just a boring report, but nevertheless is there for you to read and start understanding a little bit the overall context. It's there, and sooner or later, a lot of it will be available for public consumption. I don't think outreach will necessarily change minds, but I think, personal opinion here, but I think outreach ultimately is about informing people. It's about informing of the facts, about trying to correct misconceptions and misperceptions based on facts that we have in our hands. So in terms of, again, potential recommendations, I think for national jurisdictions going on, it's also not to lose sight of the fact of the value of communicating with the community around you about what it is that you're doing, about what evidence that you have, about the importance of people coming forward to speak about the crimes that have taken place.
Thank you. My last question for Mario. Lada mentioned that the tribunal, one of the legacies of the tribunal is that it's leaving behind a vast amount of information, of evidence that everybody has access to, whether through the website, whether by going to an information center. From your experience, how interested really are, for instance, high school students in learning about the recent past? Because most of these people, or all of them, if they're at high school, will not have been born when the war took place, when the crimes took place. Is it for them ancient history? Because, it is something that, the generation before did. How interested are they actually in researching the recent past, from your experience?
Well, not very much. I think there's one smaller group of young people, and we saw a few of them during the implementation of this project as well, who are really genuinely interested in this, either because of their family story or because of another personal reason, or they just have the affinity towards these sorts of topics. But mostly, people are not very interested in learning about the specifics. But that doesn't mean that they don't have developed attitudes about this. And I think, a position, your position towards a certain case, a certain crime, or certain groups of crimes, or a certain general, a prosecutor, is almost seen as a part of your identity in the former Yugoslavia. We came to a situation where your ethnicity is not actually assessed by the ethnicity, but by what you think and what you feel about certain issues and people. So I think a lot of young people, even though they don't have a direct interest in these issues, are very instrumentally formed on the basis of attitudes towards the cases. I would actually like to say something. You mentioned the event that the theater director Farilic organized in Rijeka in the National Theater. It was done together with the Coalition for RECOM, for the establishment of fact-finding mission, that we're as well, fact-finding commission that Youth Initiative is also a part of. And even though there were women from different backgrounds speaking about their experiences, we still had a protest in front of the theater of veteran organizations and other people who did not agree with just offering a place for these women to speak. This is something that we're fighting against. And when it comes to understanding the outreach, I think it would be very, very unfair to judge the results of the outreach from actual change in statistics that happened. I think it would be impossible for outreach to actually make instrumental change there, because the local or national politicians, the school system, these are people and these are institutions who actually influence the forming of the opinion of the people in the region the most. And also, of course, the media. And we had an idea several years ago. It maybe still makes sense to do it even now in a way in the last year of outreach. We wanted to organize an exhibition of articles in the media about the ICTY, because we noticed that the same media is going to have a very negative coverage of ICTY in one case and then a very positive coverage of the ICTY in another case, or even in the same case. When you look at the case of Croatia, the first Gotovina judgment and the second Gotovina judgment, it's two completely different tribunals in the media perception. So I actually think that showing people that they are victims of this propaganda is something that could maybe be a recommendation for the ICTY for the future. And just another note on the facts and promotion of the facts. We wanted to do something like that in Croatia and in the region as well, because we saw that every time there is a case, the media, but also the public, are just focused on guilty or not guilty. They're not actually focused on what has been established. And after we had what we thought was the final Glavaš judgment in Croatia, turned out it's not. We organized a presentation of facts. We wanted to organize a presentation of facts in Osijek, where these crimes happened and are heavily denied. It was the third venue where we could organize it. First, we wanted to do it in law school. We got the confirmation. Once the information got out in the media, the dean told us, you cannot do it in the law school. Then we actually paid for a conference room in a hotel. And again, after the information got to the media, the hotel gave us our money back and said it cannot happen here. So it's not that it's controversial to promote facts about what happened. It's that it's controversial to talk about certain things and certain crimes. And this, I think, everyone who worked in outreach understands very much. And we knowingly, when we organized the lectures in Croatia and elsewhere in the region, for example, I was going to Dubrovnik to give a presentation, and we prepared information on cases such as Strugar, something that we think young people can be open to understanding. They have family experiences with that. And once you go in through those sorts of topics, they are more prone to actually talking about different cases and different things. This is something that could serve as a recommendation. Know your audience, know it very well, and know what are what are the potential entry points into the discussion, because you are either going to start a discussion with just a little basic understanding, and then you have a shot to actually change something, or you're just going to be talking against each other the whole time, which is often the case. But these are recommendations that I can maybe share on the basis of experience when it comes to the outreach. But I think I would like to say something about the legacy of the tribunal as well. Because I think what we're seeing in the region is that the local judiciaries and the local political elites are very much, at least from my perspective, giving up on the legacy of the ICTY, when in fact it's something that could be extremely useful for them. One thing that I think local, and don't take this as a criticism of the outreach or of the ICTY, because I think the local institutions are at fault here. In 2007, between 2007 and 2011, it's also in this publication, there was the first project that the Youth Initiative did together with the ICTY, and it was a project that we called, we gave it a very unlucky name, RIP, the Regional Internship Program. And this was bringing young people from the Balkans, young experts to the tribunal. And actually most of the people who did their internships here are now dealing with the topics of justice in one way or another, either from the formal institutions or from civil society or some in the media. I think there's much, much more to learn in the region from the work of the ICTY. We are currently working on a project that is trying to push the Croatian lawmakers to amend the law on criminal proceedings to have more understanding towards the victims of sexual crimes, because when we compare the way sexual crimes were handled at the ICTY and the very few cases we have that were handled in Croatia, we will saw a huge disparity here. So we know that in terms of process, there's a lot more to learn. But also there is maybe the main issue that has to be answered, and where I really think our local judiciaries failed us, and this is acting on the cases of the ICTY. I mentioned the Gotovina judgment, and even though in the end it was an acquittal, it's an extremely valuable judgment in terms of findings, in terms of facts, in terms of documents that it established. And yet, you know, everybody in the Croatian public is fine with Gotovina and Čermak not being guilty for the crimes, but someone is, and someone has to be held responsible for that. And what we have here at the tribunal, these facts, these findings, these documents, it's something that could be much more and should be much more used at the local courts, at the local prosecutions, to really build on them. I think the ICTY in those terms really did a lot to build its legacy, but actually its legacy is in the hands of the local judiciaries at this stage.
Thank you very much for that sobering conclusion. We will now open the floor to questions from the audience for our panelists. You're welcome to ask them. Maybe if you could just identify yourself at the beginning. I see first. Let's start with the lady in the back, the registrar.
Thank you very much.
Please identify yourself.
Of course, yes. My name is Amora Ruiz. I work for the International Commission on Missing Persons. And I want to, first of all, congratulate the Tribunal for launching this publication and the activities on the legacy. Make a reflection on what ICMP learned by working with ICTY on the outreach efforts, and maybe with that comment make a question for further reflection. As it was mentioned, it was the first time that outreach had ever been considered, but more importantly, it was the first time that there was an international initiative to take justice as a solution to these crimes. And from ICMP's perspective, where missing persons was inserted into the solution. So justice and other mechanisms to look into this. So there was a learning curve for everybody and all the institutions, not only on the outreach efforts, but also how do you deal with this justice at that level. But ICMP learned, and I think that is something that we are missing, because you live in the ICTY and we live in this environment where justice is taken for granted. But the reality is that the solution of justice has been an exception internationally. So at least what ICMP has learned is that the victims of the crimes, seeing this accountability, as part of the efforts, as part of the solutions that need to be brought in. And indeed, there could be different opinions from one community or the other about who's the guilty one. But there is never a question about whether justice should be at all participating there. ICMP learned from the Karadzic case, where we were asked by the defense to bring, to put forward all the DNA reference samples from 100,000 families of the missing, as to be able to present his defense. The tribunal ordered this. ICMP sought the consent from the families, and the families said, yes, we want to participate and we are willing to share our genetic data and information with the perpetrator, because we want to make sure that these efforts work. So my question really is, and I think it's maybe something that is a pledge, considering the situation in the world where support for accountability is suffering a big attack, is how can the legacy efforts, or how can the outreach efforts, or what is it that, what's the lessons, more than what did we learn, how we were able to bring the ICTY to the communities, and more, what did the community show us that we need to bring outside to other initiatives? And that's a question that I leave open. What we learned is that justice is important, and the effort should not be humanitarian, should be accountability and rule of law related. But maybe that is something, I would love to hear your views about what did you learn from those communities, from the victims.
Okay, maybe we take 2 or 3 questions at the same time. We have the registrar and then Eva.
Thank you very much. Yes, the registrar, the ICTY, and the mechanism, John Hocking. First, I'd just like to congratulate the facilitator and the 4 panelists. It's been really, really interesting, and thank you very much. I have just a question, perhaps for the 2 non-ICTY members of the panel, Mario and Marco. Guilty pleas. People who stand up and say, yes, I did it. Yes, these crimes happened. What impact, if any, how are they regarded in terms of the different narratives that both of you have talked about? Do you have any comments on that, any information about the actual impact of guilty pleas, particularly responses, reactions from their own communities? Thank you.
And Eva, first question now to give the floor to the panel.
Hi, Eva Vukušić from Utrecht University. Thank you very much for this panel, and especially Marco and Mario. I think you're accurate on 100 points that you stated. I really think you hit the nail on the head, as it's often said. I wanted to ask if we can in some way maybe bring some perspective to this reasonably gloomy analysis, I would say. Does the factor of time or taking a longer term perspective change anything? Or is there any hope in the future? Because as we know, Germany, for example, is often listed, this great example. We know from the Nuremberg trials that it doesn't exactly work on the first day or within the first 20 years. So I just want to say, do you feel, is this generation lost? We just sort of, say this is how it is, but maybe in the future. Because I think that what the tribunal does and what the evidence does, it narrows the space of denial. Only an insane person today says, the shelling of Sarajevo did not happen, or Srebrenica didn't. But I think the discussions are reasonably more sophisticated when it comes to genocide. Is the genocide, for example, in Srebrenica, is it genocide? Is it not genocide? But no one would say like nothing happened. You really nothing happened? That's it. But I think that narrowing of the space of denial for me, I think, is a source of hope. Thank you.
From what I hear, most questions are from Marco and Mario, so the floor is yours.
I can go first. First of all, a colleague from the ICMP. We work with the ICMP too, and we did several times study trips for young people around ICMP facilities in Bosnia. But something in the cooperation with the ICMP was especially relevant for us, and I think it is a good lesson. And this is through cooperation with the ICMP, we first actually started really working together with sort of mainstream victims organizations. I do not want to idealize the victims' organizations, and I want to clearly say that often in the region of the Balkans, victims' organizations can be agents of hatred and are. They usually have the message never again, but then again they're very much linked to nationalist politicians often. I do not want to generalize, but this happens. And this is why sometimes it's hard for human rights organizations that are perceived as politically active to work with victims' organizations. We had several projects together where we actually worked with victims' organizations here, and I think they were especially relevant because on one hand what we saw was that it's very important for victims to see that young people are dealing with these things, that the message is going through, is being passed on other generations. I think this was especially important for them from that point of view, and for youth I think it was important because it made it much more real. So thank you for that. When it comes to guilty pleas, we didn't really have them in the Croatian context. We had more of hearing like, yes, we did it and we're proud of it. Not necessarily the crimes, but the military actions and the military actions. But for example, one case that we found quite powerful in terms of understanding that reconciliation also has to take into account those who have actually committed the crimes is the Babić case, which we often show the video to young people of the Babić guilty plea. Especially if we're working with young Croats, it's something that does change or has the potential to open them up a little bit to understanding the perspective of someone else. And I actually think we work a lot, obviously, with the Serbian community in Croatia as well. I think it did have an influence on them. And to Eva's question, I can either remain silent or go on the pessimist track. Because I do not believe that things are getting better. We are regularly following the research into political attitudes of youth in the region, and at the Youth Initiative we really tried to understand the area in which we're working, and this is why we do it. And if you look at the case of Croatia, there was quite a relevant research from 2011. It was done at the University Institute for Social Research and supported by Friedrich Ebert Foundation. It showed that young people in Croatia are actually more nationalist, and that a social distance towards Serbs, Roma, and others is actually greater than it was among youth in 1998. And this has to do, in my opinion, with something I've said in the beginning. The generation that we're seeing is slowly taking control now is the generation that was formed when extreme nationalism, mass crimes were the dominant ideology. I remember personally this one moment when my dad came back from the army for a few days, and I asked him, did you kill any Serbs? I thought it was very cool if he did, because that's how kids used to talk when I was growing up. And I think that even if it's not conscious, we're seeing the results of these ideologies and of this period of ideological poisoning. We are seeing the effects of it now. But this is just an additional incentive, I think, for doing this work and for doing it more intensively, and even doing it better.
Thank you. Before I give the floor to Marko, I'd just like to thank Lada for taking part in the panel. She has a previous commitment, and thank you very much for being part of the panel. Thank you. Marko, the floor is yours.
So a couple of excellent questions. Let me first turn to yours, sir. about the possible impact of pleas, of guilty pleas from members of their own community. I think you're onto something, in the sense we feel that there might be this potential that these could produce cathartic effects. Unfortunately, from what we've seen from the ICTY, they hadn't, but that was perhaps because of the nature of these guilty pleas. As you know, the big one was Biljana Plavšić, and who was a very high-ranking official of the Bosnian Serbs. She admitted to a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, the way it transpired afterwards in public perception, first of all, immediately when she made the plea bargain, there was a media spin and a public perception about it, how she did this essentially to get a more lenient punishment, which is probably what she did. And then after a couple of years, she had this nice interview in this very lovely Swedish prison with flower curtains behind her, where she basically said, yeah, most of the things I said I didn't really mean. When you have something like, by the way, she lives, where I am from in Belgrade, she lives around the corner. Lady genocide. So what can you do? So that didn't help, but perhaps in some cases it might help. I don't think we have had those types of cases really coming. And if you think about it, will people who have invested their whole lives into these projects, so the really high-ranking people that tribunals like this really want to get at, are they prone to pleading guilty? I don't think they are. Psychologically, they're not. And I don't think we can bank on that. That might be a positive effect from time to time, but we cannot count on it. Eva, coming to your question, which is I think tied to the previous question, which is like really the big picture thing. Isn't it too early to say? Like the French Revolution, Juan Lai. Is it too early to say what the effects of it are? Don't we have to wait 50 years? We've waited 20, by the way. This is 20 years after the fact. I don't think time alone will cure this problem. The only way it happened in Germany is that you had, first of all, Nuremberg was actually not hated from the very get-go. We have surveys of public opinion conducted by American occupation authorities that show that the IMT was very lovely, it was seen in a very positive light because the German population felt this was exonerating them and putting all the blame on the higher-up Nazi leadership. The moment German elites were allowed to reassert themselves, so the moment the occupying powers really left them to their own devices, support for Nuremberg plummeted. And then it was relegated to collective amnesia, which lasted in Germany for 20 years. And what brought, Germany out of it is a complicated question. A lot of things came into it. The fact they didn't talk about it may have something to do about it. What certainly did happen is you had an interruption of this transgenerational transmission of nationalistic attitudes. And as Mario was saying, that's not what happened in Yugoslavia. The current generation is worse in some ways than the generations that preceded it. So that key thing that really needs to happen didn't happen. And that type of transgenerational transmission can happen for 100 years. Look at Japan. The current Prime Minister of Japan, sorry, by the way, if I'm doing a diplomatic incident or something. The current Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, is the grandson of a guy called Nobusuke Kishi, who was a Class A war criminal suspect, the main guy of Japan doing economics in Manchuria. They have a monument to Judge Pal, the dissenter at the Tokyo Tribunal, in front of the Yasukuni Shrine. That every time a Prime Minister goes there, it provokes a horrible incident. When Shinzo Abe goes to India for an official visit, he thanks the Indian people in the Indian parliament for the courage shown by Judge Pal in dissenting from the Tokyo trial. Of the 10 post-war of the last 10 prime ministers of Japan, 7 of them are sons or grandsons of post-war prime ministers. You have this enormous amount of elite continuity in Japan. I'm not even going to talk about textbooks, all the stuff with Korea, China, whatever. This can go on for a century. There is no guarantee that simply we'll let it go and it'll fix itself. It really might not fix itself. Sorry for being depressing.
But if I just may add a sentence, I said that I don't think the outreach should be judged from terms of numbers, but I think I do want to share something that I regard as a result of outreach, and this is that it did help shape a group of people, young people in the region, who will keep promoting this message as we go on into this dire future. And I think this is very relevant still.
Thank you. We have time for one more round of questions, if there are any. Yes, I see. Wade and no, Wade.
In Chambers. Why? Sorry, Wade Pittman from Chambers in the ICTY. So, you know, as someone who's given some of these presentations for several years, you know, I just want to say that the one-on-one contact, you know, with the people who are in the Youth Initiative, and including a presentation in Belgrade, they were very impressive. These people are very dedicated and courageous. And I think, you know, I just, for the sake of the European Union representation here and wanting to get some value for their money, I'm sure, in the outreach program, my perception, and maybe it is because I'm not from the region of former Yugoslavia, but it's been very positive. You know, when I've given these presentations, and you know, sometimes it's, you know, for 30 people, occasionally it's for over 100, and then when it's over, and there's a small queue standing there to ask questions or to get some of the materials that you brought. You know, so I just wanted to say that from my perspective, it's been, you know, a little bit different than I think I've heard here today, but I mean, yeah, you guys are the experts. The thing I wanted to ask was just, you know, all of the discussion today has been about the people who are still in the region of the former Yugoslavia and the local communities. But there were a lot of people who left during the war or before it, and you know, they also have perceptions that I think will impact on the future. Do you have any perceptions with regard to how maybe free they are to have their own thoughts not shaped by the local politicians or elite?
Thank you.
Thank you. Nenad Bolshevsky, I'm the spokesperson of the ICTY Registry in Chambers. Stated, and it goes back to Eva's question about optimism and pessimism. I think there is space for optimism exactly because of the reasons that Marko stated. Exactly because of the comparison between Germany and Japan. And the difference in these two cases is the fact that in Germany, you were able to see the evidence of the Nuremberg trial. You were able to get the transcripts of those trials. You were able to see the films in the cinema. In Japan, the transcripts were not available for decades after the Tokyo Tribunal finished. And the only source actually was one news agency that covered those trials. And for decades, you did not have access to the materials. So I think that goes back to the beginning of the discussion and how important it is. I think Lada highlighted at some point, make these things available. Make it accessible to people. And that's what's going to be the task of the mechanism once the ICTY closes, to maintain these archives, to make them accessible and available to the public. And that's something that has at least a chance, it has a shot to change things and move it to a more optimistic direction. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Liliana Hellman, Legal Officer Registry. I have a question for Marko, just a brief one. Will you keep trying? You did try in the past. Whatever you said is painfully true. But I know, like, decades ago or something, you did try to change, to reach out to the people. Will you keep trying? Is it worth it? Like before with late Professor Dimitrievich, Hegemon, Das, I mean, did you keep?
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, I will actually, yeah.
Make a comment.
President, yes. We need a microphone in the first row here.
Mine will only be a comment, actually, rather than a question. And if it is considered as a question, it's a rhetorical one. And please understand, I don't want the last word. But all along, this has been, first of all, one of the small conferences, seminars, call it whatever you like, that has been really, really went deep, straight to the heart of the matter. I really admire your contribution. What perhaps I would suggest as further food for thought for everyone here who will go home and maybe continue thinking about what we have been discussing is the following. I said earlier on that I consider it to have been really bad for the tribunal not to have started with an outreach program from the day one. The harm was done, and that harm has been irreparable. But we created outreach. One can criticize outreach. You are right, I totally agree with most of the assessments that you have made. My question is, what would be the position now, towards the end of the life of the tribunal, had outreach never been set up? Question number one. Question number two. Yes, much less than you, but I have been around in ex-former Yugoslavia, and I know what the feelings are about the tribunal. But I also get the impression at the end of the day that they do acknowledge something which to me is very important. That the former Yugoslavia now, 25 years after, would have been much worse had the tribunal not been set up in the first place. This is a general feeling that I find and that I meet with not only in Bosnia, because in Bosnia one can expect it more than you can expect it in other areas. But overall, this is the general feeling that so my other question is, had the United Nations not had the courage and taken the bold step to create the first international tribunal after Nuremberg and Tokyo, what would be the position now? So these are the two thoughts that I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, I'll put these now to the panel. Marco, do you want to start?
There are so many very good points that were made. I apologize if I can't address them all. Coming to your question, would I continue sort of fighting the good fight, as it were, or should we all do it? I think the answer is yes to some point, because fighting the fight is a good in and of itself, rather than with the expectation that somehow if I write one more article, things will get better. You see what I mean? Sometimes something is worth doing because it's intrinsically a good thing, rather than because it will necessarily produce good consequences which depend on a number of many different things aligning and that are unknowable at that particular time. Which brings me to your point about, okay, there's this all material and it can be consulted. I take that point, nobody's gonna do that. Understand? Who has the time? Imagine you have an 8-year, you have a child, with their family, you work a 10-hour job. When exactly are you gonna look through ICTY exhibits? And you're a regular person in Belgrade or Zagreb or wherever. I don't look at ICTY exhibits. I don't even read all of the judgments in complete detail.
But you watch our documentaries.
Exactly, right? So I don't think that and that's not what happened in Germany. It's not like they woke up and suddenly read through the files. If you read a lot of the historical research, some things made an enormous impact in Germany that you would sort of be shocked at. Like in the late 1970s, there was this American miniseries starring Meryl Streep called The Holocaust. 5 days of, broadcast to millions in Germany. They had telethons, historians explaining all this stuff. Meryl Streep made more of an impact on Germany than the Nuremberg Tribunal. To be fair, right? If you're trying to determine causal effects. Whether this will prove to be a valuable resource, I hope so, but I don't think it's necessarily so. And coming, Judge, to your two questions, I mean, the first question you posed is impossible to answer. It's a counterfactual question. You know, what would the former Yugoslavia have looked like today would there have been no outreach? Or even had there been no ICTY? I mean, we cannot run an experiment and then, I mean, there's no way to know. My gut feeling, again, is if we're trying to look at that one particular function of outreach, which is to persuade people that the findings are true, which is not the only function of outreach, I don't think that there would be much movement. And some of these things are so unpredictable. The fact, for example, that this tribunal indicted and tried Šešelj, we all know how that went, led to the fact that the guy who's now Prime Minister of Serbia is the Prime Minister of Serbia. And what he does will have more of an impact on Serbia than anything the tribunal does. You see what, and this is not a causal effect that anyone in the tribunal could have predicted. And that will definitely have more of an effect than outreach. So the answer is I don't know. Whether there's a general feeling that it's still a good thing that there was an ICTY depends on who you talk to. I mean, the kind of crowds you and I move around with are the people who think that. But there's this vast masses of people who don't think that. And they're unfortunately the ones who need persuading. I mean, we're preaching to the choir. It's a very nice choir. Sorry.
We also had this question about people who are not in the region, who might have been from the region, who left. Can they make an impact if they return? Are they more receptive to the messages?
They could. I mean, I'm one of those people. I don't intend on returning. So that's a problem on number one. You know, can you actually return? What would you do? What kind of an impact would you have? Plus, there's the fact, which is historically certainly true with the Yugoslav diaspora, is that the people who are in the diaspora tend to be more cuckoo than the people who are back there. So, cuckoo again being a technical term.
Mario,
well, I agree. All our countries in former Yugoslavia have very strong diasporas, and usually we get two kinds of messages from the diaspora: either extreme nationalism, because we have to look into historical reasons why we have.
This might be the old diaspora, yes, who might have left before the war.
Yeah, mostly.
I think there's also a difference there, that they left during the war or before the war.
But then we have a lot of people who went during or after the war, who got educated and who are actually fighting a good fight when it comes to that. And maybe I would just respond to a point that Marko made on this about whether it would have been better if there were no tribunal, and who is now the one actually leading sort of the social change in that regard. I think we saw it in Croatia. We had a situation once that a candidate for prime minister won the elections after his biggest gathering was in Split. Under the sign said, "We are all Mirko Norac." The same prime minister won the next election 4 years later under the promise of EU membership after he extradited everybody to The Hague. He's, I don't need to say, a member of the party that was the ruling party during the war. I think only people like this can actually make these changes. It doesn't mean a lot when someone who represents the opposition or what the other thing means says, "I'm sorry for crimes," or doesn't act like this. It's important when they do it. I do think ICTY contributed to an important thing, and this is understanding that the crimes have happened, that the crimes are something that that should be condemned. From the Croatian perspective, we first, and this is at a time when I was growing up, had the mainstream discussions that went along the lines with, you cannot commit a crime in a defensive war. This was the main point. So even if Croatian soldiers, of course, according to the perception, we didn't really wage a war in Bosnia, but if Croatian soldiers committed crimes in Croatia, they're not crimes because it was a defensive war. I think slowly it changed towards understanding that I think now people think that they are a little less crimes than the ones you commit when you go to other people's country, but they still regard them as crimes. And I think this would not have happened without a tribunal. Surely the local judiciary didn't really contribute to that much. And I think on the symbolical level, this is extremely important. This is something that defines the society's perception of justice. I cannot think of of much more important things.
You mentioned European Union, so I'll just abuse my position here as moderator and ask you one last question. You mentioned that, for instance, Gotovina was extradited as part of Croatia's obligations to cooperate with the ICTY as part of its accession process with the European Union. How far has the perspective of being a member of the European Union and this whole process contributed to facing up to the past and also to creating a society in which open dialogue about the crimes are possible? You mentioned the difficulties that you are still facing in Croatia when you want to talk about crimes that were committed by the Croatian army. Has this become easier with Croatia becoming a member of the European Union? Or for Serbia, the question, is the government more receptive to enable an open dialogue as part of its accession negotiations because it wants to present itself as a good guy, if you want?
Well, actually, the accession period was an optimistic period if I compare it to today. We had a situation where the Croatian leadership was ready to do almost anything, at least show that they're doing anything that the EU wanted them to do. Once Croatia became a member, that leverage disappeared. And I think things started to get worse. But I actually think that I, of course, together with the rest of civil society, advocated very much for the implementation of reforms, and we share this very pro-EU attitude, so I can speak from the position of a disappointed citizen. I think what we saw was that the EU, but also the EU did not really have the best understanding of what it can do with the accession process. And I remember always hearing about the changes in terms of chapters have to be irreversible. There's no such thing as irreversible change in a society, but if we look at sustainable change, this has to be social change. You cannot just change the institutions and expect that things are going to change in the society. And I think this is the lesson that the European Union learned on the example of Croatia. The first report that the Youth Initiative published after Croatian accession, in the foreword we said reformed institutions in a non-reformed society. We did not focus a lot of attention on social change. We saw that actually the reforms were being done in spite of disagreements. The government did not want to do them. They did them because they were what needed to be done in order to fulfill the #1 political goal after Croatia's independence. I can only regret that more had not been done on social change. And this is maybe a wide response to your question, but I do think we sort of saw that once Croatia became a member of the EU, with the justice system that we had, with the justice results that we had in terms of prosecuting war crimes, that it had a counter effect, actually, that the EU membership sort of served as a legitimization of Croatian nationalist response to the challenges from the conflict. Again, with the pessimism.
I would just endorse what Mario said with regard to Serbia. I mean, of course, the difference is that Serbia is still in the accession process. The problem now, however, is that the EU's leverage is somewhat smaller because of all the problems that the EU is facing, including the refugee crisis, including the rise of authoritarianism in Eastern Europe generally. And so I am not sure the end game in Serbia is going to be more different than in Croatia. I have to apologize, I have to catch a flight.
Thank you.
I have to run, I'm so sorry.
Of course. I want to conclude this discussion and thank you all for coming, for finding the time to share this publication launch with us and for asking these interesting questions. Thank you very much for that.